Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tori and today we are going to be setting up my bullet journal for the month of April. Now, before I begin, I did want to mention that I messed with my camera settings a little bit and I'm hoping that I won't have messed with the video quality too much. So hopefully everything is going to work out and you will see this video. So before we jump into my setup for April, I did want to do a little bit of a flip through of what we've got going on for March so far. My March theme was tulips, and I am still super happy with how this theme turned out. I loved all of the colors that I picked. So I've got everything for April sketched out, and as you can see here, I've got quite a bit sketched out. So my theme for April is going to be somewhat of a vintage birdcage type theme. And I don't know what really got to me that made me decide to do this. But yeah, it's going to be a vintage birdcage type theme with like blobs of color. So I will be using 3 Tombow dual brush pens in the color N95, 291, and 312 for today's setup. I'm also going to be using some Pigma microns in 01 and 005 for all my line work. I also have here a couple of stamps. Since I'm going to have such a drawing heavy theme this month, I am going to use these Notebook Therapy, I think it's the typewriter alphabet stamps. I will be using those for all of my headers. And then I have this stamp set from Michaels that's got some butterflies and a couple of little birdies in it. So I'm going to use this stamp for my mood tracker this month. And I also thought maybe I could use some of these birds and have them sitting on top of my bird cages that I will draw. Now, before we jump into this, I did completely forget one of my setup pages to sketch out. So I've got my main page, my calendar page, and then I go straight into my moods and habits. I completely skipped my orders and my currently page that I usually have in my setups. And I had already gotten so far into sketching this out that I did not want to erase it and try to redo it because I was really happy with how this particular sketch looked. So that's not going to be in today's setup, and honestly I'm not sure if I'll even include them this month or if I'm just going to let it go and pick it back up again next month. But that's really all of the kind of intro that I have to say. I would love to know your thoughts below on this theme and if it's one that you've seen before, or you know what you think. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump right in. Oh, I'm also using archival black ink from Close to My Heart as my ink for my titles and any of these little images that I will stamp. So I will hand it over to my voiceover self, and we will kind of get started with this setup. I am going to jump right in and start stamping out all of my titles, or just my one title for my cover page here. I'm just stamping out the letters for April and leaving one dot grid space in between each letter. Then I will move on. I'll kind of stop for a moment because I was a little intimidated myself personally to start inking out these bird cages. So I kind of just fuss around with nothing for a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and get those drawn now. I'm going to just kind of trace over all of these lines that I drew and then really dive into each of the particular details. So I do also want to mention that in my intro, I kind of discussed how I had messed with my camera settings a little bit. I was messing around on my camera yesterday, actually,
And when I was recording this, I noticed that I had a 4K option for my videos. And I don't know if I just never paid attention to that or just thought that maybe I didn't really need the 4K. But I decided to give it a shot. So I switched my video settings around to film my video in 4K. And my camera did not like that. So you will see lots of cuts for probably the first 8 to 10 minutes of this video, because about every 2 minutes as I was trying to film in the 4K setting, my camera overheated and shut off. So I was very, very frustrated and ended up about halfway through kind of just stopping and going back to my 1080 that I normally film in. So I was also a little bit worried that it would affect the editing of this video, but so far everything seems to be going decently. But I can visibly see, and you might even on screen as well, I can visibly see the difference between the video quality from when I was filming in the 4K to when I switched back to the 1080. And I'm disappointed. I'm so disappointed because it looks so much better in 4K, and I truly wish my camera would let me film long term in that method because I loved it. So anyways, these bird cages that I'm drawing out right now, I looked up photos of vintage bird cages from Google, not like drawings or anything like that. I looked up actual pictures of bird cages and kind of used those as my inspiration for how I would sketch out these bird cages. If I can find them again, because I think I saved at least one of them, I will pop them up on the screen here so you can see what I was using as my visual inspiration. I'm quite proud with how they turned out. The kind of arched hangers that these are on, I actually used a large circle stencil and just did about half of the circle, and then kind of erased where I didn't want it to be anymore and added some kind of curvature to it to make it look like a stand. So I've got my primary line work done. I'm not going to be coloring any of the bird cages that I'm doing. I'm not going to be coloring any of my actual lined drawings in. I'm only going to be coloring in any of these blobs of color that I will be doing. So I've got a nice neutral, like cool gray, a light blue, and then a kind of tealish blue as well. So I just picked out 3 random spots on here, and I'm just gonna color those in. And I'm really glad that I ended up not coloring any of the bird cages in, because this is quite a lot of color for me personally, like these very large blobs of color. And as we move throughout the rest of this setup, it only becomes more and more. I am also going to be adding a little bit of shading with my smallest Pigma Micron, my 005, just a little bit of shading to add a little bit more character to each of these bird cages. And then I'm going to outline a straight line behind my April cover titles, my April title. I've got that stretched across both pages, and it's highlighted in that cool gray color as well. I'm just going to add a broken line on the dot grid spaces above it and below it, and that's going to be the kind of line work, not line work, but like the border, I guess, element that I will be using throughout the rest of this setup. So for my monthly page, I'm going to once again just start with all of my stamping. I decided, it might have been last month or the month before, that I don't like making a whole cover page that says the month and then turning around and then putting the month on the calendar again. Just something about that doesn't really sit well with my brain. So I started titling my monthly calendar this month. I feel like it fits a lot better and doesn't make my cover page feel pointless, because if you're going to have multiple, I don't know. It felt like I was being too repetitive. And while I do love being repetitive in some cases, that was not one of them. So I changed my calendar from being like the month title or the month as my title to just say this month. And then I'm going to, instead of doing a lined calendar like I always do, I don't think I've ever done a calendar like this, at least with like a blobby type square, I am going to just color in each 5x5 square that I sketched out with a blob of color. And I'm going to alternate them. So I'm going to do the teal color first, then I'll move to the blue color or the gray color. I think I moved to the gray color next. So I do teal, gray, and then blue. And that color like lineage, that color order is going to be the color order that I'm going to use for the next 2 pages as well. So I'll go ahead and get these all colored in, and then I will start getting my teeny tiny little bird cage sketched out on this one as well. You'll see that I do already have the gray line sketched behind my this month title for the page, and that's because my camera then once again overheated while I was working on that, so I don't have that footage. But you'll see me do that on the next page, the next 2 pages. You'll see me actually color that particular line in and how I did it to make it look so clean and straight. Another thing that I had actually done while I was waiting for my camera to cool back down so I could begin recording again is actually sketch out a birdcage on this particular page as well. I didn't actually have one sketched out, but when I was doing my filming, I remembered that I was speaking to my husband about placing a birdcage down there in that corner to kind of fill up some of that space and also have one on this page as well, but I never sketched it out. So while my camera was cooling down, I decided to sketch out a really quick little tiny bird cage. And honestly, looking back on all of the different bird cages that I drew in these setups, I think this one might be my favorite. I don't know. I love the little heart opening, and I think it's adorable. Another thing that I did with all of the bird cages that I have in this setup is I actually made them all open bird cages. So they all have kind of like a door opening, but I don't have them closed, quote unquote, in any way. I liked the idea of having all of these bird cages as my decoration, but then using the little 2 bird stamps that I have to have all of the birds that I stamp out being outside of the bird cages and just, living their best drawing stamped bird life. So I don't actually have any of these bird cages kind of closed. They are all open bird cages, and my little birdies, my little fictional drawn and stamped birdies, just, they go in there whenever they want to just have a nice little rest. I made up a whole little story in my head as I was getting this set up because I was super frustrated because of the camera issues. So I was just, having a time making up a little story in my head to help me with my setup. So on this particular bird that I just stamped over here underneath my calendar, its little feet look like it's sitting on something. So I just sketched out a really not realistic looking branch and just kind of had that bird sitting on top of that branch. I did also, while my camera was cooling down, pop back over to my cover page and stamp out a couple of the birds on my cover page as well, which you will see when we flip back through and do the final flip through. I had completely forgotten about that stamp set that was sitting right in front of me this whole time and didn't do any of the bird stamping on that particular page. And I can't remember if I do any stamping on this page either, to be completely honest with you. But we have moved right along. We've got my moods and my habits page here. I did stamp out all of my titles, but I'm not going to do my title border until after I get all of my blobs sketched out for my mood and habits and all that good stuff, because I want to give the ink that I'm using a decent amount of time to like settle into the paper and fully dry before I run a marker over it, because I don't want it to smear too badly. For my mood tracker that I'll be doing this month, I do have 5 rows of 6 little boxes sketched out, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my calendar and just do a blob of color inside each one. Each of these stamps is a little bit more than 3x3 dot grid spaces. So these stamps that I drew were the squares that I sketched out were 3x3, and my little blobs are going to be a little bit smaller than that. And that was all by design and by choice, because I wanted my stamps to kind of overlap the sides of the little blobs that I have drawn here. Another thing that I didn't actually plan for but ended up happening was, because I have 6 dot grids or 6 squares drawn out, if I didn't move my colors around, I would have had a line of color down each row. And that is not what I wanted. So I noticed that when I went to go do my second kind of row, and I decided that I would just move them over and create like a diagonal instead of going straight up and down. That was a lot more pleasing to me than having a straight line of color going down the page for each of the different colors. So that's how I kind of got around that. I've also chosen my 6 stamps that I will be using to track my moods. I talked about this last month, and I really truly just need to track 8 moods, but I didn't have enough room on the page, and I think I'm just gonna need to make do. I don't know. I'm hoping that I can do it. I'm hoping I can. I chose a different moods than I normally do, or at least when I've done the 6 before. I've chosen a couple of different ones than I've chosen from those times. And I believe I chose happy, sad, okay, productive, tired or ill, and angry were the 6 moods that I chose to track. And tired and ill I usually separate out and have those each be their own mood category. But I didn't do that this month, and I think what I will do is maybe just add a T or an I next to the little butterfly, just to differentiate those two if I am stamping out the butterfly for the mood for that day. That way I don't have to add an extra one in, but there's still a way for me to tell the difference, because that is, this type of stuff that I like to kind of keep track of. For my habits, I'm not doing a calendar this month, which I've done so far the last 3 months of my bullet journal setups. But because I had this super extravagant birdcage down here at the bottom of this page, I just did 2 rows of 15 dot grid spaces each, and I'm going to color those in completely with my markers that I've chosen for this month. And as the month progresses, I will just use a little X or something like that, I haven't fully decided, to mark off if I've completed my thing for that day. So taking my nightly medicine, reading, filling in my bullet journal, and not spending money are the habits that I will be tracking again this month. And yeah, hopefully, I don't know if they're technically habits. They're just things that I really want to be accountable for. Like I really need to make sure that I'm taking my medicine every day, right? So I like having this in here to check it off to make sure that I am actually taking my medicine every day. And I've also noticed a correlation for if I forget to take it, then I usually feel like crap the next day, and that will affect my mood for the next day, and it's like a whole thing. So it's not really like a habit that I'm tracking, but just things that I really want to make sure that I am getting done, and I like to be able to check those things off. I did, when I was outlining my BUJO box, definitely started with the wrong color. So as soon as I realized it, I switched over to the right color, but now there's a little bit of darker blue on there, and I just decided to ignore it. So there we go. I am now getting my last birdcage drawn out. I didn't actually include an opening for this particular birdcage, but as I was getting it drawn out, I had my archerandolive acrylic ruler next to me, and there's a little circle in there. I just pulled that over and drew out a little opening. So I'm doing all of my main lines in the 01 fine liner. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. And then any of like the back cage I am doing in the 005, just to make it seem like it's a little bit further away and give a little bit more dimension when it comes to telling apart those bars of the bird cage. The back lines, I am also going straight through the opening and making them a little bit broken or dashed as well. This birdcage, it was a labor of love to sketch out, which is why I ended up not adding back in my orders or my currently's page. And honestly, I probably could just flip over and just add it backwards too. I just haven't fully decided because I know I'm going to want to have to sketch out a whole new page and do this all over again. And I just don't know if I really want to do that. I still got to do my reading journal setup. I might just make a basic list. Who knows? I don't know what I'm doing yet. I don't know if I'm going to do it or if I'm going to skip it, but we shall see. I will let y'all know what I decide, probably when we are doing my May bullet journal setup and I flip through these pages again. Since I've finished with my birdcage drawing now, I am going to move on to getting my blobs of color added to the page. And as I mentioned on my cover page, like you can see, there's a lot of blue happening here, and that is one of the reasons I was glad that I decided not to color in those bird cages, because I feel like there's enough color on these pages. I also really like that it's a very monochromatic feel as well, which was completely unintentional. But after I did start kind of applying all of the color, I realized how monochromatic I had selected my colorway, and I can't say that I don't like it. So the last thing that we'll be doing on this page is just highlighting my title rows. And I am just using some very cheap washi tape that I got from Michael's. It has very little stick, so it's perfect for pulling on and off the page, which is also great for lining these kind of title rows as well. So that is how I got such nice clean lines for those title rows. And then I'm just using that acrylic ruler from Archerandolive to do my line work for those rows as well. And once I've got that done, we will hop over and just do a little bit of a final flip through. I would love to know your thoughts on this setup down in the comments below. If you made it to the end of my video, please leave me a little bird emoji in the comments. This one was a labor of love, y'all. I'm telling you, I'm very happy with it and very glad that I will enjoy looking at it every day for the month of April. But dang, it was this one took a lot out of me. And it's probably got a lot to do with the filming, but here we are. We're done. We made it. Go us. Here we go. Like, all right, now we're going to do the final flip through. Like I said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.